How disturbing can an animated series really get? Many of you have probably seen this unsettling drawing before the source of it comes from the mysterious, disturbing, difficult to understand yet incredibly deep series Boisvert. Let's take a closer look.
Can you picture an empty room with yourself at the center? Answer me quickly and honestly. Can you picture an empty room with yourself at the center?
First video, Take Care, begins with a strange piano melody in the background, subtly giving us clues about the story. Our main character appears to be an ordinary but hopeful person. When we first meet him, he tells us himself to focus on small victories during hard times, waking up early, exercising, being productive, and ignoring the sounds coming from the basement. But immediately after giving this advice, the piano melody begins to distort, and the main character can no longer resist the sounds coming from below. That's when we meet the source of those noises, the shadow. The moment we encounter it, the audio becomes even more distorted, and within the unsettling darkness, we hear the questions the shadow asks our protagonist.
Do you know what day it is? When did you last go outside? When did you last see your friends? Your family?
If you watch the video carefully enough, you realize the shadow does not first appear in this scene. It has actually been present since the very beginning. Whether the protagonist is talking about waking up early or drawing at his desk, the shadow is almost always there in the background. The second video takes place roughly a year after the first. Protagonist opens the video by saying, "It's been 1 year, and there are clear differences now." He still follows the routine, but in a much more broken state. He wakes up again, though not at a proper hour like before, carrying a sense of sadness and emptiness, waking at a time when everyone else has already started living their day. Then we are faced with a horrifying realization. The character who once told us to ignore the sounds from the basement is now living in the basement himself. But the terrifying shadow from the first episode is gone, and as we notice this, the protagonist looks toward the desk he once used to create art and produce things, then repeatedly smashes his head against it. Another horrifying truth reveals itself. The protagonist himself has become the shadow.
You're so kind. You part caring as you breathe. You're still in the basement, buried in flames.
The third video is very different from the previous ones, much faster and more chaotic. We are also introduced to two new characters. Begins with the face of an extremely disturbing figure and a screen that simply says, "The end." There are two choices, give up or continue. When you attempt to choose continue, the horrifying face smiles, and the text changes into, "Not a chance." Immediately afterward, the music grows more aggressive, and we meet a new, more humanoid character. As the terrifying figure begins losing itself, the humanoid character pulls a knife out of its own mouth and kills it. And with that, the third video ends. The fourth video continues directly where the previous one left off. The humanoid character pulls the knife from the body of the creature it killed and drags it away. Underground, we once again see the shadow from the earlier episodes, still trapped in the basement like a prisoner. At the same time, a new character named Complex joins the series, and something begins happening between Complex and the humanoid figure. Amid this chaos, the creature killed in the third episode falls into the basement beside the shadow, and the shadow begins devouring it. Then, during the fight, the knife the humanoid creature uses to attack Complex falls into the basement, and the shadow disappears. The fifth video is far stranger than the others. This time, we see the shadow on a throne. Then we find ourselves seeing through the protagonist's perspective, climbing or perhaps descending a staircase where it's impossible to tell whether we're moving upward or downward. The protagonist struggles not to become the shadow, while the shadow continues speaking to us.
I have seen it. I have heard of it. To draw near without reprisal. Bridge the chasm. I have sought you out. But it is to no avail. I am immobilized. And when you come near, detaching yourself from those with everything, you will see in my eyes. Fear.
But there's something strange about the final sentence. If you turn on subtitles, the word displayed on screen and spoken by the shadow fear is translated as love. And then we reach the final episode. This episode begins with quotes from the Bible and is overwhelmingly chaotic. We see Complex flying through the air, and then the apocalypse begins. The shadow and the humanoid figure we've seen since the second episode begin fighting each other. The shadow effortlessly avoids every attack and eventually captures the humanoid being. Then we see Complex. The humanoid figure reaches Complex's hand and throws a knife toward the shadow, killing it. And finally it says, "I love you." Afterward, a sentence appears on screen in French. There's only one happiness in life: to love and to be loved. Stop hiding now. Put the knife to your throat. If you watch this series with all its music and animation, it may seem like nothing more than bizarre animations made by a disturbed killer, or perhaps you may not understand anything at all, and that's completely normal. Every interpretation and theory people have about this series makes sense. But beneath all the chaos, surrealism, and violence lies a much larger meaning: toxic positivity. In reality, the entire series is an incredibly accurate reflection of modern people and the lives forced upon them, along with the promise of happiness used as a reward for enduring it. Every character we see from the very beginning actually represents an emotion or aspect of the psyche. The main character represents the ego. The shadow represents the self, the suppressed, rejected side of a person that still desperately wants to exist in some form. The humanoid figure from the third episode represents anger. The terrifying face represents the will to continue. Complex represents the psychological complex that influences decision-making and suppresses common sense from the subconscious. And the series as a whole tells the story of the self struggling to exist, to understand itself, and to become an individual while fighting an internal war. Think about the protagonist for a moment. Every morning he tries to wake up early, stay productive, exercise regularly, trying to live the version of happiness dictated to him. Instead of accepting that he is going through difficult times and truly experiencing those emotions, he ignores them and focuses only on tiny victories. He locks away feeling bad, being unhappy, failing, waking up late, skipping workouts, all of it into his subconscious, into his basement. Every single time he sweeps his emotions, failures, and unhappiness under the rug, forcing his willpower to its limits just to keep going. And eventually his own anger tears apart his willpower. Then his anger loses to the shadow. When you watch this series, it becomes impossible not to find pieces of yourself within it. Take the first episode again, for example. The protagonist struggles to create while constantly confronting the shadow he keeps suppressing. He locks it away deep inside, only to face it later, and eventually become it in the second episode. Doesn't that remind you of suppressing parts of your true self? while desperately trying to live the happy life society forces onto you. While desperately trying to live in the third episode, the battle between the willpower desperately trying to maintain this toxic happiness and the self consumed by anger. Doesn't that feel familiar too? And in the fourth episode, anger losing its willpower to the shadow, doesn't that resemble the way we lose ourselves to the very things we suppress every time we force ourselves to maintain toxic positivity? Once you begin noticing all of this, Boisvert transforms from a strange web series with disturbing visuals and beautiful music into something much deeper, a journey of existence itself. And if you pay close enough attention, you can find fragments of yourself in every single element of it. Personally, I think the message of this series is that sometimes certain things simply need to be accepted. Whatever happened, happened, and it could only ever have happened the way it did. Nothing, absolutely nothing, can change even the smallest detail of the past, and exhausting yourself trying to change it only leads to self-destruction, just like what happened to the protagonist in Boisvert. Whatever happened was the only thing that could have happened. All we can do is learn from it and keep moving forward, even if our ego refuses to accept that sometimes. Every event we encounter is simply what could happen. Trying to become productive while unhappy is, at the same time, admitting that you are unhappy and unproductive. And constantly calculating tomorrow, or even the next few seconds, does nothing except destroy the present moment. None of us truly know what could happen even 1 minute from now.